What's going on, everybody? We are back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about my top 5 most important improvements to the 1911 that actually matter. Now, I know that's a little inflammatory, it's tongue-in-cheek, but also that, like any humor, there's got to be a kernel of truth in it. It's got to be a little bit true or else it's not funny, right? So I do think that for me, these are my top 5 most important improvements that have been made to the 1911 over all the years. Now, at the end, I am going to bring in, some other examples that maybe you guys would guess that I'm going to say, but these, I don't know. I'm not so sure most people are going to guess what I'm going to say for my top 5, but let's just jump right into it. So, number 1 on my list for one of the most important improvements that have been made to the 1911 since its inception, metallurgy. So when we go to the early days of the 1911, those early guns, and I'm talking like the first 5-6 years of the 1911, metallurgy was not what it is today. The metallurgy we have today is fantastic. Even some of the more lower end factory guns have much better metallurgy than they did in those days. Now, right away, the collector guys, the historian guys are going to get offended at that and think that I'm denigrating those guns. I'm not. Those guns should be looked on with awe and reverence. I'm not criticizing them, but it's just a reality. You have to realize this is like early industrial age. They just did not have the modern manufacturing, the modern alloys that we have today. So, look, facts are facts. It was lesser grade stuff. But let's get into the steel. So what those early 1911s were primarily made of, it was forged carbon steel, but you have to realize not all carbon steel is the same, right? So in those early days, everything was made out of this same type of steel. A lot of people call it like Core 10 or 10XX or, whatever the different names are for the early steel. Today, we would call it something like a basic low alloy 1045 steel. And that 1045 means basically there's about 0.45 carbon content in the steel, and the higher percentage you go with the carbon content, the harder the steel is capable of getting. Now, you can get too far where it becomes super brittle, so generally it caps out somewhere around at the 1095 mark. That's about as hard as you want to go before things start getting brittle. But essentially, that's what they were using in those days. It was a low alloy carbon steel. It was iron, it was carbon, maybe small amounts of manganese, but for the most part, this is very basic steel, and everything was made out of the steel back in those days. Man, train parts, railroad spikes, you name it, man. They used this steel for a lot of stuff. And they also chose it for the 1911 and a lot of guns back then for a lot of reasons. One is, look, you're talking about a factory product, right? And if you hire a steel worker and he knows how to work one of those steam-powered hammer presses, right? And he's familiar with working carbon steel, they have to understand the way that steel's going to behave under a hammer. And this becomes really evident to you after about 4-6 hours of, really hand forging some of these carbon steels. They behave differently. They take heat differently. Their heat treatment is different. They cool quicker or slower. Like, they all behave very differently. And so back then, using a common, basic, low alloy carbon steel made a lot of sense because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. On top of that, here's the other thing. That's what's available. When you're trying to make a factory product, especially in those days, you have to have raw materials that are available. If you go for some exotic stuff, I don't even know if there was exotic stuff in those days, but you try to go for some super fancy Swedish steel, I'm not so sure you're going to be able to keep up with your own manufacturing needs. Now, when you compare early carbon steels in that day, again, like a 1045 steel, to what we do nowadays, even what we would say something like this is a basic carbon steel, or something like the Springfield, right? It's a basic carbon steel 1911. I would say it's not the same carbon steel. Not all carbon steel is the same. For instance, nowadays we add in things like chromium, molybdenum, and nickel, and we do little tiny things to these alloys to make them slightly more corrosion resistant, make them a little tougher. We don't want them to wear as much. And now you have so many different types of steel. You've got different types of tool steel, D2, S1, S2. Gosh, you go down the list, I can't keep up with them. Now, what does this translate to and why does this matter? It's very simple. Modern steels are much tougher. You're going to get much more life out of your pistol with modern metallurgy. And it's not just heat treatment. I want to make it very clear. You can use the best heat treatment methods on basic steel, and modern alloys are still going to be better. So number one on my list, metallurgy. That's one of the best improvements that have been made to the 1911, because now something like this, they wish they had this metallurgy like in these Colts and Springfields, T-Sauce, all the modern pistols that are good forged heat treated steel. They wish they had this back then, because man, we've got the good stuff. This leads to a very long lasting pistol. Number two, heat treatment. Heat treatment. I know. I don't know if you guys guessed that's what I was going to say, but it's very closely related to the first one. So you got to have good materials. You got to have a good quality steel, but then you also got to have good heat treatment. Now, they figured this out pretty quick. Within the first few years of the 1911, I want to say within the first 10 years, they started to realize pretty quickly that basic carbon steel, which was forged, but it wasn't heat treated super well. But what they started to figure out really quickly, and I'm going to roll in some pictures here, was that those early slides and frames were starting to crack. So they started heat treating, but what they were doing was spot treating. So you started to see some dark areas around this area where the slide stop notch is in the slide. You saw the front of the slide start to get heat treated, and eventually it went to the slide rails, and basically they ended up just treating the whole thing. But heat treatment is such an important part of these 1911s. So in the early days, they would do what is called surface hardening or carburizing. And essentially they would get on the Rockwell hardness scale, a hardness of somewhere between 30 and 40. Now, I'm not going to get super detailed on the Rockwell hardness scale, but essentially it's what it sounds like. It's a way to measure the hardness of a steel. With modern manufacturing, we have things like cryogenic treatments, vacuum heat treating, we have grain refinement, we have through hardening. Gosh, you go down the list, and there are some really high-tech methods of hardening these pistols that gets you a Rockwell hardness of 45, 50, or greater. And so the hardness of the steel is so much greater than what they had in those days. So number two on my list, again, just like metallurgy matters leads to a long life in that pistol, what doubles that long life, triples it, is the hardness. The thing's got to be hardened properly, and now we get that, we understand it, and we're getting such good products in these days. In fact, there are 1911s recorded in the military where they've got 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, even 100,000 rounds through a single frame, through a single slide, right? Those early 1911s in the early days, they would not have lasted through that kind of abuse, and they didn't. We know this because not a lot of them are around anymore. A lot of those early pieces got fragged and they got melted down and recycled. Just to put this into perspective, the expected lifespan of an early 1911 was somewhere around 6,000 to 10,000 rounds. And that's before what they called major wear occurs. Now, the minimum life with modern metallurgy and modern heat treating, the minimum is 50,000 rounds. If you don't agree that's not an improvement, I don't know what to tell you. Number three on my list, modern machining. I hope you're starting to realize these all have to do with the manufacturing process of the 1911 and not with individual little features. I think you're catching on by this point. Number three is modern machining. So what this allows us to do is, because we have modern CNC machining, we have machines that can, at a rough level, get the part tolerances so close together that they require less hand fitting, therefore driving down the cost. And this makes wonderful pistols like the T-Sauce line of 1911s so accessible. Now, obviously, this one's highly customized, but you guys know this pistol. This one is their sort of entry-level gun, and it's their A1 government model. This is a $300 pistol new, and that's crazy for being all forged, 100% machined, no MIM, no cast parts in this gun, and it's a well-made gun. That's fantastic. And a huge part of why that price can be driven so low is the lack of hand fitting required. Now, in those early days, they just did not have that capability. Now, in those early days, they would forge the slides and frames pretty close, but then the rest of it, you had a series of jigs and templates to really machine that stuff down. And then once you got down to it, there was still a little bit more hand fitting than we have to do today. Now, with modern CNC machining, not only can we get those tolerances so tight, which reduces hand time, which reduces price, but we also have a much nicer product. When you open up an early 1911 look at the inside, there's machine marks everywhere. They are very crude. Now, does that really matter in the long run? Not necessarily, but I think from a consistency standpoint, from it just being nice and things like that, I'd say less machine marks is better. So number 3 on my list is very easily modern machining. Number 4 on my list has to do with the trigger, and this is where I'm actually going to hone in on a specific part that I think is greatly improved. The original 1911s, and I'll roll in a picture of what those looked like, they had what's considered nowadays a long trigger, meaning the face of the trigger, the distance from the back of the pistol to the face of the trigger is longer. This pistol is physically longer than what you might see later on. So these long triggers aren't bad. They're not better. They're not worse. They just are what they are. A lot of people prefer them. Now, for people back in those days, generally people were a lot smaller in those days than they are now. They don't have big meat hooks like us corn-fed folks do. And so in 1924, the Army adopted the 1911A1, and they made a bunch of changes to the pistol. But one of the most noticeable, I would say, is the trigger, and this is what's considered a short trigger. And you can see they are definitely a different size. Now, for me personally, because again, this is my top 5, I get to pick what I want, but I want to hear yours. For me personally, the long trigger is just a little too long for my anatomy. And look, I have very large hands, but I have a hard time finishing flat and having a clean, straight to the rear trigger break with a long trigger. I have an equally as difficult time with a short trigger. It's too far back, right? And now my big hands are kind of consuming that trigger space. So for me, the perfect solution to that is the medium trigger. I think this is one of the greatest inventions, at least for me. Again, your mileage may vary. I think the medium trigger is absolutely perfect. So the guns that I generally am going to carry and really rely on, I'm going medium trigger. I've got this in 3 other 1911s. This one here, and then also in my Colt. But this is my preferred trigger. And now, as far as the specifics, I go with a solid and smooth trigger. I don't like texture or anything, just a real basic thing. But the medium, man, that is the sweet spot. I don't have to think about the trigger. I don't have to think about getting around a long one or overcoming the small one, the short one. So for me, number 4 on my list is the medium trigger. Now, my favorite brand of trigger, since I know some of you are going to ask, is the Harrison Consulting medium solid smooth trigger. They come in both this basic aluminum look and then a sort of black anodized look. They're about $40. They're not super cheap, but they are worth it. It is a very well produced trigger. They fit snug in the rails within the frame, and they also have an over travel adjustment screw. Now this one, it's an exposed over travel adjustment, but you can see here they also have the over travel adjustment that's actually behind the trigger here. So now the unfortunate thing is if you want to adjust that, you got to take the whole dang gun apart. But if you don't like that hole in the face and you want sort of a very classic vibe, they do sell that. But I just love a medium trigger. It is the sweetest feeling trigger to me. The last one on my list is finishes. One of the best improvements when it comes to actually like carrying these guns, employing them, sweating on them, all that good stuff, is finishes. So as much as I love a blued gun, obviously you guys know this guy very well. This is my T-Sauce that I blued. And look, I think it came out really nice. It's a very nice, very deep royal blue pistol. I love blue pistols, but when you start carrying these, especially in my state, in Florida, you're soaked in sweat the minute you walk outside. That means the pistol is soaked in sweat. The gun's going to corrode pretty quickly. Now, this is a cold blue, so it's not as durable, but you do have pistols like my Makarov. This was re-blued, and this was done with like a hot salt blue, and this is a much more durable blue. However, it will still corrode. Then you have my Springfield, which this is what some call a bead blasted blue. It's sort of a very basic and crude blue, a little more durable than something like this, and like a little more durable than those original 1911s, but again, it will corrode. Then you get up into the guns where they actually started parkerizing them, where you have this manganese phosphate finish, and this is definitely a bit of an improvement, but if I look on the back of my pistol here on the mainspring housing, it's corroding. That's just a fact of life. So when you get into some of the modern pistols, and even TSOS, they sell 1911s that are Cerakoted, and this is Cerakote. Cerakote, ion bond finishes. There's a lot of great finishes out there, but really, this is going to preserve your pistol for a long time. If you guys have never seen a truly deep rusted pistol, you're just taking away life from the steel that you will never get back. You're pitting the gun, and it's just bad. It's bad. So, look, I do have my blued guns. I like them, but I'm primarily not going to carry a blued gun like something like this, or any of these other ones, just because you're going to have to literally wipe it down several times a day. You're constantly going to be chasing rust. And I don't mean just surface rust. Now, this is where parkerization is kind of nice, because you're not going to get that deep rust where it's actually like going in and creating pits. This, you can wipe it down. There will be brown on the rag, but it's not like detrimental rust, right? It's very surface level. But some of these blued guns, man, if you don't stay after them, they will absolutely rust like crazy. So I think top 5, man, if you're talking about functional, not pretty, because if it's pretty, stay blue all the way, right? From a functional standpoint, modern finishes like Cerakote, my personal favorite, really is a massive improvement from the OG 1911s. Now, as I promised that I would in the beginning of the video, I'm going to talk about some other features that you guys were probably expecting me to bring up, and that is, more modern features. For me, the reason the modern features like, sights and checkering and all these things and extended this and super fast that, the reason that stuff's not on my list is because I think the base 1911, flat, smooth mainspring housing, original wide spur hammer, low profile GI sights, this basic 1911 I think was peak. And I know I'm in the minority there. I'm fully aware of that, and people are going to yell at me, but hey, I get to like what I like. You can't yell at me for what I like, okay? So for me, the original 1911, not A1, was peak 1911 in every single way, except for the stuff I mentioned. So for me, I don't want these scallops, the A1 scallops in the frame. I don't want the lowered ejection port. I even like the real OG GI sights, which you really almost can't find. I think like Turnbull and maybe Cylinder and Slide still make them, but it's like $150 for a little rear sight. But all the old stuff, that's what I prefer. So there you go, guys. That's my list. I want to hear your list. What are the top 5 things for you when you go all the way back to the original 1911? If you can pick only 5 things that were like, yeah, these are the best things that happened to make the gun more usable for me, I want to hear your list. I'm really interested to see what everybody comes up with. So hope you found that entertaining. It's a fun topic to talk about. But until next time, guys, we will see you. And also, don't forget, we have Patreon. You can go on there and join for $5 a month, and that gives you access to technical videos like installing and changing parts and doing different things to the 1911. Those videos are on Patreon, and there's more being added continuously. Those are videos I'm literally not allowed to put on YouTube, or it can threaten the monetization. So you get access to that there, and also you're going to get access to information. I talk about upcoming videos and guests and new guns that I'm getting before they ever hit the channel by weeks usually. So you get advanced information. And then also, my favorite part is there's a really cool group of people in that community. We have a group chat where everybody's in there. You guys get to share your journey, like, hey, I just got this gun, or I'm going to the range, and it's just really fun. We're constantly posting pictures and sharing videos and information, so you get to be a part of that small community. I am also on X, and you can find the link to that in my channel bio there. There's a link to my X account. I'm posting there quite often, more than I do on YouTube. And then finally, one thing that we're going to start doing that you saw on our recent live stream was we're going to start doing, not every time, but occasionally having guests in for the live stream to just have a hangout. Not so much an interview, but, just talk to other people, other YouTubers, and even some of our Patreon members will have you on for, 45 minutes, an hour, and just talk guns. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to start doing those live streams more regularly. But overall, guys, I really appreciate you getting us here. We've popped the 4,000 subscriber mark. I'm still amazed every week how many subscribers just keep coming, and really grateful for you all. So until next time, we'll see you.